Welcome to the Your Illini Nation pregame show, live from Minneapolis. Bret Beherns along here with Jeremy Werner from IlliniInquirer.com on a beautiful day, must I say. It is actually nicer here, Jeremy, than it is back in Champaign. When I looked at the schedule and this game came out and I saw November 6th today, I went, uh-oh. But here we are. It's beautiful.
I think the last time Marley and I were here, it was about 35 degrees and raining. So I haven't been to this stadium. I remember the first time it was snowing and the guy was eating a dilly bar on the sideline for the Minnesota staff. So yeah, but this is one of my favorite stadiums in the Big Ten. I think that surprises a lot of people. But this is a relatively new stadium, not too far from downtown Minneapolis. Yeah. It's right on campus here. One of my favorite places to come see a game. And if Illini fans, maybe in October if there's a game, or maybe some year there's going to be a September game, good place to come. It's a great city to come and see. And right now they got a pretty dang good football team with PJ Fleck running the ship here.
A lot of oars in the bowels of the stadium back here behind us. As I walked in, there's just 1,000 oars on the way. It's just what they do. It's their brand, and they do it really, really well. And whatever you think of PJ Fleck, that's fine. I know a lot of Illini Nation probably does not like him for what he is, but he has won football games here, and I think you got to give him credit for that.
Yeah, he's not everybody's cup of tea, right? And I think Bret Beason said earlier this week, listen, we're very, very different people. Right. But I think you got to respect what he's done with this football program, which Minnesota, I mean, Jerry Kill was a very good coach. Glenn Mason consistently made bowl games. So they've found consistency. They haven't been as high as Illinois had some highs, but they've been consistent. But PJ Fleck has made it into one of the better Big Ten West programs. He recruits his butt off. He recruits very well. He's got a lot of Illinois natives on his team, which Bret Beason was taking notice of, and he's done a better job of getting Illinois kids to Illinois and keeping them from PJ Fleck for the past year. But PJ's been one of the best teams in the Big Ten the last couple of years. I think 17-13 his last 3 years here, and in the Big Ten, he's been very, very effective. So this is the kind of team you want to knock off. If you want to take some steps up in the Big Ten, it's going to be very difficult because Minnesota does a lot of things Illinois and Bret Beason eventually would like to do well, which is run the ball well, stop the run, and have a good decision maker at quarterback.
Yeah, and get some beefy offensive linemen. I mean, they've got some absolute beef on that offensive line. We'll break all that down coming up here in the next 30-ish or so minutes on our pregame show as we get set for the 11 a.m. kickoff. ESPN2 here live from Huntington Bank Stadium. Used to be called the TCF Bank, I believe, but now called Huntington Bank Stadium here in just outside of downtown Minneapolis. The Illini are facing the Big Ten West leaders today, and at this point it surprised me at least when you look at the standings that Minnesota is ahead of both Iowa and Wisconsin. But here we are, and the Gophers have an opportunity. They're competing for a Big Ten West title. I mean, this is an important game for them, and I know they have a couple of left against some quality opponents here, but like, just as Penn State was caught, right, like looking ahead maybe to Ohio State, you know, if you're an Illinois fan, maybe you hope Minnesota's looking a little bit ahead here, but I think it's a different spot. They're leading the Big Ten West.
Yeah, I mean, you get the chance to play spoiler again. And Illinois wants to be in the position in future years where they're playing for a bowl game, and Illinois still is. They're fighting for their bowl lives tonight, but more likely they're playing spoiler because Minnesota has games left against Iowa and Wisconsin, right? Like they control their own destiny, as we like to say in this business. They control it. They win their games. They're going to be in Indianapolis, which I think surprises me. And I think even for people who are optimistic in Minnesota who thought they're going to be a top 3 team, maybe a contender for the Big Ten West, I don't think they thought after losing Mo Ibrahim, their star running back, then losing Trey Potts, their next star running back, and then losing Bryce Williams, another good running back, that they would be in this situation. But they control the ball incredibly well. They run the ball incredibly well. You mentioned the offensive line. They got several probably future pros on that offensive line, and they just play. It's kind of a boring brand of football to some people. In the past, right, they had Tyler Johnson, they had Rashad Bateman, had a great passing attack. now they just run the football. They play like a Wisconsin team, and they do it extremely well. I can't wait to see that game because it's two similar styles of football. But that's kind of what Illinois wants to play and is playing right now as well. It's just their quarterback play. We got to see Brandon Peters build off last week. I think it's a game Illinois has a chance to win because I don't think Minnesota at the skill positions or on defense is incredibly talented, but they do what they do better than what Illinois does.
And look, we did the story yesterday. I know you had it in your story. I had it in mine here yesterday. They're not out of bowl consideration yet, and I know a lot of people are saying, okay, they got to win their final three. Like, you know, you're wasting your breath saying that, but mathematically they're not. And I know that the players are thinking about that. Like that's in them. Whether Bret Bielema has brought that up or not, or whether he will bring that up for motivation, I would doubt it, but it is what it is. You know, they're not mathematically eliminated yet. And so as we, talk about that scenario, understanding that most of you have probably moved on to basketball, and that's okay. But they still have an opportunity to play spoiler once again. And I think the thing that maybe some people are hanging on to, Jeremy, is the fact that we have seen it at times. It hasn't been consistent, and especially late in games it hasn't been there. But this team is capable of beating Minnesota today. I don't have, we're not going into this game in Lovie Smith 2017 playing a bunch of freshmen and going, they just don't have a chance today. They have an opportunity. It's just they have to click and especially execute late.
It's hard to predict this team.
I don't know. What are they?
They beat Nebraska, and I know Nebraska's not great, but you beat them week one. That was a good win. You beat Penn State at Penn State. None of us predicted that to happen. And then none of us predicted them to lose to Rutgers following. Right? And Rutgers is a better team, and it's not like Illinois went into that game thinking, oh, they're going to blow them out. But to lose that game and to lose to Purdue in such a heart-wrenching
the way you did.
Yeah, and to lose to Maryland with
that's the tough
a touchdown lead. Like, that's what's so frustrating about this season is, I know Illinois fans don't want to hear it. Yeah. It's been close. Like, there are certain games you change, not to go Beckman on you, but you change one play or two, and all of a sudden, Illinois could be 5-4 coming into this game, looking to clinch bowl eligibility, looking to get itself in the West consideration at the end because they've played pretty solid football, at least defensively and running attack-wise and special teams-wise. Just their passing game has not been good. And then, again, hard to predict, Rutgers, they pass the ball well, and they don't win. And then the best quarterback performance of the year from Brandon Peters, and they don't win. So Bret Bielema's talked a lot about consistency through 4 quarters. That's been the issue. They have not played consistently through 4 quarters. And we can break it down, Bret, by quarter this year. They've been an awful first quarter team. They've scored 5 points, and 2 of those are on their defense against Nebraska. And in the fourth quarter, they're outscored 52-25. So they've played terribly in the first and fourth quarter. They've actually outscored opponents in the second and third quarter. Second quarter, they're up 69-52. Like, they have just been a good middle of the game team, terrible the bookended. So they got to find a way to play a good 4 quarters. And how about just a good start? They've had terrible starts to almost every game this season. I wonder what that could do confident-wise. And just this is going to be a limited possession game, Bret. If you can score it early in the game, you kind of set the tone, and maybe you can set the pace of this game.
Yeah, and we think we've talked all year about this team is not built to come from behind.
Yep.
You don't have a good passing attack, and so if you get down 2 scores, you feel like the game is essentially over at that point. And it was at Wisconsin, and we saw that. They went up a couple of scores, and it was over at that point, and you just didn't get the sense Illinois was going to be able to come back. So why do they start slow, and why are they able to execute then in the second and third quarters?
Great question, and I think
you got all the answers, right?
We asked Tony Peterson. I asked Tony Peterson that this week, and he said, "Yeah, we've been working on it. We've been trying to start faster." I think it says a lot about game planning, right? Like, the script is not working for him, and they've tried some different things, and for whatever reason, whether it's poor quarterback play, whether it's not getting enough possessions because your defense can't get off the field, or whether it's just offensive line not executing, wide receivers not executing, it isn't working. So you got to change something up. You got to do something different. And they have tried to take shots early, right? Like, we've seen them try to take shots early, and it doesn't work. Or a couple of weeks ago, they had a great first drive, and Archer Sikowski turns it over against Penn State, right, in their territory. So it's things like that, like you seem like you're close, but you just can't break through. But then they find a way to adjust, it seems like in the second quarter and after halftime, and find a way to get success, but then they can't maintain that going into fourth quarters. And we've seen so many fourth quarter drives in enemy territory end up with 0 points, and that can't happen.
Yeah, and I think that does show some credit to the coaching staff that they are willing to make adjustments. But then for me, it's okay, we'll make adjustments earlier on to come out with a fire and come out and try and execute early. And some of that's on the players, certainly, but I think the coaching staff does deserve some credit there to say, hey, whether that's realizing after the first quarter and a reset in a sense, or at halftime, like, this isn't working, so we've got to try something different in that. But we'll see if they can come out and maybe light a fire early here and see if they can compete against this Gophers team, who I feel like is a lot different from that 2019 team, you know, that had double-digit wins. And do you get that sense that they're a lot different? They have the same quarterback, but I feel like they're doing a lot of different things. And I know you mentioned that a little bit earlier with the pieces, especially without Bateman, that they've lost, that are now playing in the NFL. So yeah, how different are they?
You can just see it in Tanner Morgan's stats. Tanner Morgan, his first year, was not a very good Big Ten quarterback. The next year, he's an all-Big Ten quarterback and had the best pass efficiency, I think, in the country, because he was throwing to two future early draft picks with Tyler Johnson now catching passes from Tom Brady, and Rashad Bateman catching passes from, I believe it's Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. So those guys were great. They don't have those kind of wide receivers. They have a solid group of wide receivers, but it's more of a committee. It's their offensive line has really matured. Really highly ranked recruits that BJ Flack got in here. Daniel Fa'alele is 6'9", 380 pounds from Australia. And to be honest with you, Brett, I don't even think, even though he's a top 40 prospect in the NFL draft, I don't even think he's their best offensive lineman right now. Blaise Andrews, their right guard, is playing at an all-Big Ten level. And then John Michael Schmitz, their center, who's from Illinois, has played incredibly well. So the right side of their line is just great. And it's a lot like Wisconsin. They play a lot more like Wisconsin now. In the past, they threw the ball a lot more. Now it's just more of a run-first team where they want to limit possessions. They want to just take time of possession. Sounds like what Bret Bielema wants to do. So they play a little bit differently that way. And then I think the biggest way they've changed, Bret, is their defense is really good. I don't think they're overly talented on their defense. Maybe a couple guys that will play in the NFL. But Joe Rossi has just completely changed that team from last year. They were giving up 30 points per game. Right now they're giving up 19. That's a huge change that allows your offense to play the way they play.
So what can Illinois learn if they're similar to Wisconsin from that Wisconsin game? Illinois came out and really didn't try to establish a run the first couple of drives. Then they go do that against Penn State, and it works a success. So what can they take from either of those games going up against a similar type team in a Minnesota game today?
You got to convert downfield. Like, listen, I think they can run against this Minnesota team. I don't think anybody can run against Wisconsin. Like, Minnesota's actually given up some yards to some solid running teams. Ohio State put up some yards against them. Rutgers put up some yards against them. So I do think they'll find a little bit of success on the ground. But they're going to do a lot of what Illinois does defensively, which is keep everything in front of them and force you to put together long drives. But that just means Brandon Peters, if he plays like he did last week, I think this offense has a chance to be successful. I thought Brandon Peters, the first throw I saw when it was down the field to Daniel Barker, the first 20-plus yard play in 5 games, mind you, he just looked confident. He looked calm. He looked poised. He stepped up in the pocket, had good protection, and made a quick decision. And I think we saw that throughout the game, and I think that's one thing as you look back on that second half. Illinois just didn't run many plays, but they also didn't run many plays for their quarterback, who was making good decisions. So they need to, if they see that kind of confidence again, you need to let Brandon Peters swing the ball around, gain some confidence, because this isn't a great wide receiver crew, but you do have enough weapons where you have to take those shots, and you have to take what the defense gives you. And right now, defenses are loading up against Illinois in the run game, understandably so. So that means your quarterback has to make plays. We'll see if Brandon Peters can do it 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, and give credit to Brandon Peters last week. I thought it was one of his best games at Illinois, and he didn't get maybe the praise that he deserved because they didn't get the win, but I was very impressed with Brandon. That was the quarterback that I think we all thought would be a 6-year Brandon Peters and come out and show what he was capable of, and yet we just didn't see that all year. When we talked to him after the game, he said he just felt confident. Whether that was the coaching staff instilling that in him, whether it was the game plan, whatever that was, he was the quarterback in my eyes that I expected to see all year long. That's why I felt like Illinois had a chance to go to a bowl game if we had that Brandon Peters. Maybe we would have got that if he didn't get hurt. We'll never know that, right? But he needs to be that quarterback we saw last week, in my eyes, if Illinois is going to have a chance.
And listen, that's not a world beater, right?
It's not.
But it's kind of what Tanner Morgan does at Minnesota. We're not asking him to win a game. We're asking him to move the ball, make good decisions, make quick decisions, not turn the ball over. And Brandon did those things last week. And the problem with Brandon is, like, we've seen it. We haven't seen it consistently. I think people look back at that 2019 year like it was something that it wasn't. Like, Brandon was very inconsistent that year as well, but you saw a confident Brandon Peters that year. Last 2 years, he just hasn't been confident in anything he's done, whether that's injuries, whether it was the COVID, whatever. But we saw the glimpse that we were waiting for, and that's not really high expectations. Throw for 180 yards.
Right.
Like, that's not very many yards.
But he was 14 of 19. That's efficient. That's all you're asking him to do.
Right. If you get a 60+% completion percentage, a touchdown or two, and 150+ yards, you feel like you're going to be competing in this game. And I think Brandon Peters is plenty capable of that. We'll see how last week's confidence builds into this week.
Yeah, but his completion percentage, when you look at the numbers, isn't great either. That's the thing that stands out. He's not a 60% passer overall at his time in Illinois. But yet, it's not that much to ask, because it's easy for us to say that. But it's like, can you just complete 60% of your passes? I'm going to lower this iris here a little bit, Jeremy, for us. Yes, as for me, it's like, okay, can Brandon Peters, keys to the game, be efficient, control and manage the offenses, which is all we've heard Tony Peterson ask of him all year long. Don't be a hero, don't be a world beater, just control what you do. And can they limit Minnesota to that 20-point range again? Once again, last week, it's 20-14, and you feel like Illinois is right there defensively, giving itself a chance to win, and they can't get it done. Is that 20 mark where you're kind of landing at for this game?
Yeah, if they can keep them to 20 points. Listen, I didn't think the defense played great last week. Like, we could talk about the stats, and Ryan Walters' crew kept them in the game, right? And they have played winning football. Like, that was a CC+ performance for the defense, which is solid, right? Like, but they weren't able to get off the field. Like, Rutgers was able to get that outside run going all game. And part of the reason the offense didn't score is they couldn't stay on the field, but the defense couldn't get off the field. Rutgers had the ball for about 35 minutes in that game, and they need to be better on the edge. Minnesota's going to attack them a lot with the RPO game, which is basically quarterback can give it to the running back or can decide to throw a quick slant. And that's very difficult to defend because it's quick movement. You really can't get pressure on the quarterback, but it also tests guys with their eye discipline and do you stay in your gap and all those things. So that's going to be a difficult challenge, one they haven't faced a lot here recently. But the defense has played well enough to win. The offense has to play that complementary football that we haven't seen. But I think even Ryan Walters would say, even though they only gave up 20 points last week, it wasn't their best performance. But they've done a really good job of mitigating damage, like when teams drive on them, holding them in field goals. So I expect Illinois' defense to let them hang around a little bit. But can the offense score 20 points? We haven't seen that outside of the Charlotte game, right? Like it's at Purdue or Penn State. It took them how many overtimes to get to 20 points? So
counting by two.
It's been a long time, so that's what's difficult. Like this Minnesota offense is probably going to be able to get to that 20-point mark. Can the Illinois offense do that? We just haven't seen it.
Yeah, and that's a valid point. And just of like, and when you put it in that context, it's like they haven't scored 20 points since Charlotte, other than the Penn State, or more than 20 points, let's say. That's not very good, and that puts Illinois scoring offense in a very, very low spot nationally.
I think in regulation, the last time they scored 20 points in a Big Ten game was Nebraska, right? In a Big Ten game?
Yeah.
I'm thinking of this off the top of my head.
Man. When you put it that way, it's you start to think about it and what that is, and it's just not very good. And there's no other way to phrase that, but it's just not very good. And I think the defense, like you had said, did put them in position and has put them in better position to succeed. It's just can they score those points on a Minnesota defense that's been pretty good this year?
Yeah, and there's a reason everybody's kind of focused on Tony Peterson and why he's getting a lot of criticism. Because we all know, he doesn't have a lot to work with. Quarterback-wise, they're struggling, right? Offensive line, they've been inconsistent. Wide receivers, there's not a lot of talent there. But you see what Ryan Walters is able to do with the same kind of talent issues, right? And Ryan Walters has taken this team from a number 88th ranked defense last year to top 60, top 55. Illinois' offense has actually regressed from last season. So that's why there's a focus on Tony Peterson, and there should be criticism because he hasn't been able to get the most out of his talent, in our opinion. Even though there's not a lot of talent, they should be better than what they are right now.
There's going to be a whole lot of new talent coming to town next season. I know that much, and already 2 transfers this week. That should not be surprising to most Illini fans that follow the program, as Marquez Beason and Derek Smith both announced they are transferring. There's going to be a lot more. I don't want to speculate on who that might be because I don't think that's fair to the kids or the athletes, but for me it's that 12 to 20 number. I would not be surprised, Jeremy, if there's 15 plus kids that announce they're going to be transferring in the next month, and that's just okay in my eyes for what Bret Beason is trying to do and build a program here with new talent.
Yeah, I think every time somebody enters the transfer portal, there shouldn't be the reaction. I think we should all be conditioned, whether it's us in the media or you at home, that, oh my gosh, what's happening? This is college sports now, especially college football. 10 to 15% of your roster is probably going to turn over every year with guys leaving, transferring, because they're the third stringers or the second stringers. Marquez Beason is a big name, right? He was Lovie Smith's highest ranked prospect. He played 7 games in 3 years. Injuries cost him. We saw his first week of training camp. He was phenomenal. He had about 5 interceptions without pads on. Then tore his ACL, wasn't the same after that. Played a little bit at the end of last year, and he didn't play all that well at cornerback, wasn't all that physical. Then they moved to the wide receiver, had a hamstring injury, and it just didn't work out. It's a shame because Illinois doesn't get a lot of talents like that, but a guy like Devin Witherspoon, who didn't get all the buzz, has played like a 4-star prospect, right? So I get it. Marquez Beason's a big name. Derek Smith came from Miami, but those guys didn't have a role on this team in the future, so they decided to get into the transfer portal, probably get ahead of the curve with everybody, and maybe get their destination somewhere else. Like at Missouri, Antonio Doyle, who Illinois is very interested in, a 4-star
and recruited
linebacker.
the first time around.
He entered the transfer portal, or he's in Texas A&M, Mizzou and Illinois are very interested in him. He didn't have a spot. It's not that he isn't good, it's just it didn't work out for him there. But yeah, Bret Beason is going to reset this roster, right? He's going to bring in probably 10 to 12 transfers, and Illinois is going to lose probably about 10 to 12 guys in this offseason. It's all expected. It's all expected. You just don't want any surprise names. You don't want any names that you're counting on today of guys who are supposed to be here for the long term enter the transfer portal surprisingly. But if it's a guy who's a 3rd stringer or a senior who hasn't been playing that much, those aren't surprises anymore.
Sun's coming out here. It's a beautiful day in Minneapolis. It really is. And we'll see if Illinois can come out and compete today. And how I frame it, Jeremy, is for every transfer that Illinois has out, they're going to bring in another transfer in. And it's a new opportunity for them to see what they got. And like you had mentioned at the start, it's just the reality of college football. It's not just Illinois that is going through this. It's every single D1 program where guys, like you said, instead of sticking it out a lot of times and seeing what they can do in a couple of years, they just find a new spot. That is the reality of college sports now.
The key is getting better players than the ones that leave. And the transfer portal the first year for Bret Beason, there hasn't been a lot of high-impact guys, right? Like you think of Jafar Armstrong has not made an impact. We thought he would make an impact. They sold Prather Hudson, this guy who's made an impact on defense. He's been a good special teamer for them, but they were counting on maybe a little bit more. Artur Sikowski and CJ Hart, they made impacts. Of course, have season-ending injuries, but they just haven't gotten the impacts from the transfer portal that they were hoping for the first year. They got to do better second year because they need a lot of starters. Super seniors, there's a lot of them leaving on the offensive line. There's a lot of them leaving on the defensive line. They got to be able to upgrade the current depth that they have on the roster, which they weren't really able to do this past year.
Is that talent evaluation, like you mentioned, there's a couple in there, especially CJ Hart, where you said, man, that guy's no doubt a starter. Is that talent evaluation from the staff, or is that them wanting to bring in, obviously they wanted to bring in talent, but guys that they knew would be good locker room guys here to begin with? What's that balance in those guys that they wanted to bring in at the start?
I think that you're right. I mean, there was some culture guys they wanted to bring in. They also wanted to bring some in-state guys like Max Rosenthal, who's only been a special teamer as a fullback. I mean, Jack Badovinac, I got to mention, he's been starting here recently in the offensive line, a former Loyola Academy kid that's come in and made a solid impact. So those guys are culture guys. Prather Hudson has been that. At the end of the day, you got to get talent. And Eddie Smith has not played from Alabama. Jafar Armstrong's not played from Notre Dame. And those guys are talent upgrades, but they haven't fit exactly what they want, or they haven't, obviously made the transition very well. So that they got to find just better talent. I mean, there's no way of saying that. And I think now, Bret, that they've been here for a year, they have a better understanding of what they need, who they need, and what positions they really have to address.
Right, and that's why I mentioned that, Jeremy, because it's when you're coming in and you don't know anything or don't know anybody, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, well, if I know I can get this culture guy early and take him, maybe I'm more willing to take him if you're Bret Bielema or his staff. If you know that he's a good locker room guy, good culture guy, yeah, okay, maybe not quite the talent that we want up there. Now that you're invested in it, you know what it is, and you've seen it play out on the field, you can be a little bit more aggressive in that kind of talent and what you want. Now that they've already set the culture here, right? I mean, they know, and especially with those guys that are going to be here, or you would think would going to be here. Look, there's going to be some surprises too, right? There always are. There always is. There's going to be a couple guys that when they announce their transfer and we go, didn't see that one coming. And that's okay, because that, once again, it just is what it is as we move along here in the next busy couple of months. I think Bret Bielema will be more general manager than coach in the next 6 weeks.
Yeah, it's a big part of the job. And we got to talk about the quarterback position, right? Like, the hard part about that one in the transfer portal is what kind of offense are you selling? Because there's going to be a lot of talented quarterbacks. And every time you see a talented quarterback, former 4- or 5-star recruit enter the portal, that's a good thing for Illinois. Now, selling those guys is going to be difficult, but there should be a lot of depth. There's only so many starting spots available in Power 5. But Illinois, I think, has a tough job of selling that quarterback of, hey, this is the offense you're going to be in, this is how we'll use you, because it hasn't been successful. On the other side, I think you can sell offensive line. I think you can sell running back. I think you can sell defense. I think Ryan Walters would go to defenders, go, look what we did with guys who really didn't fit our system. We bring you in. We think we can take off with you. So the quarterback, wide receiver, that might be hard to sell. All these other positions, I think they can sell based on what they've done so far this season.
Right, and I think it's a fair question for the quarterback to say, what is my offensive line going to look like? And there's a lot of turnover that's going to happen on this offensive line coming in next year. And I wouldn't blame a quarterback. If my kid was coming in here to play quarterback, I would say, what's the offensive line in front of him? And I think that's also a fair point that Illinois is going to need to go get a couple offensive linemen, most likely, because they're going to be unproven on the offensive line next year.
Yeah, I mean, you think of next year, like, who do you have slated into that starting offensive line group? Julian Pearl, and you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like, it's really different. Like, Josh Kreutz is probably going to be the starting center.
As a redshirt freshman?
Zach Barlow, a redshirt freshman, will probably be involved there. But after that, I mean, Alex Pilstrom will be involved, but they've offered a bunch of JUCO offensive tackles here recently. I think they'll get one of those, and I would imagine getting somebody on the interior to really give you a veteran boost.
Yeah, it's going to be a big concern and a big question going into next year is who's going to replace all those guys. Most notably at center and Doug Kramer and Vidarian Lowe at left tackle. You know, like you go down the list there and you're like, man, they are losing a lot of starts. And Palcho obviously as well, and both Lowe and Palcho, two guys, most starts in school history.
And Badovanak. And 5 of your top 7 offensive linemen are going to be gone next year.
Man, we'll worry about that next year.
But Bret Bielema gets crushed for saying that.
Yeah, right? Exactly. It's just the facts. It is what it is, and I don't have a problem with him saying that at all. All right, let's talk some predictions here as we go along and wrap up here live from Minneapolis on the field. What'd you put on the site? What'd you think? It's going to be tough. Illinois now up to 15-point underdogs today, Drew.
Yeah, I was kind of going back and forth with that spread. I think it's a really, really good number. I think this team plays similar to Wisconsin. I don't think they're strong defensively. I think Illinois is going to have a hard time staying on the field and getting off the field on defense. So I started the week 24-13. I moved to 27-10 just because you watch Minnesota and they do a lot of similar things to Wisconsin offensively. I do think Illinois is going to have some opportunities offensively, but Bret, we just haven't seen it. We haven't seen them be able to put up 2 touchdowns in very many games, so I just struggle to have them scoring that. It is a beautiful day, so I think special teams-wise, James McCourt should have some opportunities, but I wouldn't be shocked if Illinois has a chance to win this game in the fourth quarter either, just because we've seen that game after game. They've had that chance, but can they close it out? Can they start well? And can they end well? It just hasn't happened.
All right, I'm going 31-10. I like that 10 number. I think Illinois is going to be in there and have a chance to kick a couple of field goals. I will say it was really windy here yesterday. the wind is not quite as bad right now, but yesterday when I got up here, I went, man, it is a windy day out here. We'll see how that plays out tomorrow with the kicking game, but it is beautiful right now. So I'm going 31-10. I think Illinois is going to be able to score one touchdown today, but I do think they're going to have a hard time moving the ball a little bit in that, as we'll see. And like you said, I wouldn't be surprised either if they come out and it's a one-score game in the fourth quarter, and Illinois has a chance to go out and try and compete and see if they can wrap up a fourth quarter as well. All right, Jeremy, what do you got on the site now? Because it's basketball week. Think about that. Illinois basketball opens its season on Tuesday. What are you and Piper talking about basketball-wise as we get set for the season opener?
Well, we had a lot of stuff yesterday about a commitment, an early commitment. Marquez Beason out of Chicago St. Rita. He's probably going to be a top 50 prospect in the country. If not, he's definitely a top 75 guy. But to get somebody that early, it took me back to the days of like Tracy Abrams and Jeremy Richmond and Myers Leonard all committing as underclassmen. That doesn't happen all that often. I think for Illinois, it shows you what winning can do. And now that these kids in state, you get them here early, it shows you how Illinois can start building that and start to have prolonged success. So you're not worried after every year of, oh, it's going to drop off after this year. Yeah. No, you got talent coming in waves. And I think it helps sell more talent in 2023, 2024. So they're off to a really good start there. And yes, we get to start on the season. We get to see what they look like without Kofi Coburn for a few games. I think they'll be fine with only 3 games suspension. I know people aren't a fan of it, but he broke a rule and he's paying a penalty for it. But I think they'll be fine. It'll be interesting to see Coleman Hawkins, Omar Payne play a lot more. But it's nice to have basketball back, and Bret, it's nice to have the fans back. We were just talking about how busy you are with the high school sports coming out, but man, it feels good to be busy again this fall.
Yeah, no doubt. And similar, I don't want to say you ever want your best player out, but last year when Iowa was out, I think that helped them. I really did. I think it helped them come together and figure out how to learn to win without their best player. And obviously Illinois fans want Kofi in there, but I think they can learn some things about their roster and their depth here early on. I think that could be beneficial a little bit later on in the season.
I do think it's harder to replace Kofi Coburn, as weird as it is to say, and then I would assume it's just because he's a 7 foot, 285 pound guy. It gives you some nerves going in those early games that you probably wouldn't have with Kofi. But I agree with you. I think in the long run, getting Coleman Hawkins and Omar Payne that experience can only be a good thing. Because later on in the season, if Kofi misses a game due to injury or he gets in foul trouble, those guys have been there, done that before. So it just prepares them for the long term. So maybe that's a silver lining. Maybe you drop a game at Marquette or something early on that you don't think you should drop. But this team should be good enough that it shouldn't matter commensurate to
right. I think we're past that point of 3 or 4 years ago, Jeremy, where it was like, they lost 4 games in the non-conference. Is that going to mess up their NCAA tournament bid? This team's going to be an NCAA tournament team, no doubt about it. They have the talent and they have the experience to go get it done. And we will have the Your Illini Nation pregame shows with Derek Piper once again this season on basketball. Excited to pair up again with the Illini Inquirer crew and bring those for basketball season, as I know Illini fans are looking forward to what should be a very fun next couple of months. All right, check out Illini Inquirer here. You got about an hour before the game as we get set for kickoff 11 a.m. on ESPN2 between Illinois and 20th ranked Minnesota. Illinois trying to play spoiler here once again. You'll have your podcast after the game right here with Joey Wagner, who's also in town for the ball game, and we'll have our podcast as well after the game, plus highlights, reaction, and my post-game report on the news coming up tonight at 6 and 10. For Jeremy, I'm Bret. Thanks so much for watching the Your Illini Nation pregame show. Bye week next week, and then at Iowa in a couple of weeks, 2 weeks from right now, as Illinois is into its home stretch of the season here. And maybe they can get a bowl. All right, maybe not. We'll have to see. There's still an opportunity, right? And never say never.
Back-to-back games before you can win 3 straight games.
If you win 3 straight, it's called a winning streak, and it has happened before. All right, for Jeremy, I'm Bret. Thanks so much for watching the Your Illini Nation pregame show. We will see you Tuesday from State Farm Center, live on the court. The fans are going to be rocking. I'm looking forward to that for the Your Illini Nation pregame show as Illinois hosts the Fighting Deion Sanders, Jackson State, there for the season opener. All right, thanks so much for watching. Enjoy the game today. We'll see you after on these same digital channels for Bret Beason.